Good morning, 49er fans. I'm Jason Aponte, joined by a very special guest, Matt Maiocco of NBC Bay Area Sports. We're going to talk a lot about the 49ers quarterback position, training camp battles, and a little bit more. Stick around right after this. Welcome, everybody. Let's go Niners. My name is Jason Aponte. What's up, guys? I'm Jason Aponte, joined by the legend, Matt Maiocco. Matt, thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great, Jason. How's everything with you?
Very good. It's good to see you again. We only really get a chance to speak at the Combine, so it's really good that, we've got another chance to speak, at least on, on this medium and everything. But again, I appreciate you taking out time for little old me.
Yeah, no problem at all. I appreciate you taking out time for little old me.
Stop it, Matt. All right, Matt, let's not bury the lead here. There was a comment that was out there, floated around in the Twitter circles, and it was about Sam Darnold. And for the people that don't know, it was one line out of an entire section of which you spoke. You spoke for a while about it, and I feel like the one line was taken. But basically, the line that had a bunch of people up in arms was, Sam Darnold is the best thrower of the football the 49ers have ever had. Matt, can you explain?
I think I said might be.
Might be. Got it.
Yeah.
Might be.
No,
so,
I definitely said that, yes.
All right. So I feel like, again, you wrote an article that contextualized it a little bit more, but I want to give you a chance to explain it a little bit further for the people that didn't read and just go off of headlines.
Yeah, I think the overall point I made was that Sam Darnold can throw the football. And, when you think of Sam Darnold as a quarterback, what's the number one attribute that he brings to the table? It's the ability to throw the football. And I know that sounds, kind of crazy because we're talking about the quarterback position, but there are some guys that, I would never have described, Joe Montana as, he's a thrower of the football. I mean, I could list 20 attributes that made Joe Montana, one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, and thrower of the football isn't really up there. I mean, absolutely. He has arm talent and, is accurate and all that. But with Sam Darnold, I think the reason he was drafted number 3 overall was because of this kind of exceptional arm talent that he had. And when you look at the 49ers and the quarterbacks that they've had, who have they had here recently? Brock Purdy played really good football last year, but I wouldn't put, his arm talent up there among the best. I would say, Garoppolo probably had a little bit underrated arm talent too. But, maybe to a different degree, he's changing arm angles and all that. But when I look at Darnold, I mean, it's the ability to throw a football. That is why he made it into the NFL as the number 3 overall pick and could have easily been the number 1 pick. So to me, that's not necessarily a compliment, because if we're talking about a guy being a great thrower, typically that means that maybe he's not a great quarterback. And I think there's a lot of untapped potential there. And maybe, the arm talent that Kyle Shanahan hasn't had at that quarterback position. But, as Kyle himself has said, there's a lot more to playing the position. There's anticipation, there's timing, there's a feel for the pocket, there's, being able to read defenses, it's quick decision making, it's supporting cast. And, in the case of Sam Darnold, it's also, I don't know that he's had a great chance to succeed. I don't know that his coaching has been all that great through his first, 5 NFL seasons. So, I didn't necessarily think it was going to be controversial. I know when I said it on the podcast, 49ers Talk, but I also said it on KNBR. And I remember, Brian Murphy kind of pressed me on that, like, what about John Brody? And, I didn't say this at the time, but I'm thinking too now, like, if you're talking about a quarterback 50 years ago as the first person that pops into your mind, then you know what? Then certainly Sam Darnold could be in that conversation. I think I kind of said, he might have the best arm talent, or might be the best thrower of the football 49ers have ever had. And then I said, okay, well, he's in that higher echelon. Now, all this said, I haven't even seen Sam Darnold throw the football on the practice field. But, in talking to Frank Gore and other members of the 49ers, including Kyle Shanahan, he's expected to kind of open some eyes in the offseason program just through that one attribute of being able to sit back and deliver the football. So it's the 7-on-7 drills, and it's the 11-on-11, practices in the offseason and training camp, where I would fully expect Sam Darnold to kind of stand out just because of that one attribute that he has. But, I've also said that there's no getting around it. Has he been an average quarterback in the NFL? Probably not. I would say he's probably been a below average starting NFL quarterback.
I agree.
But he has that one trait that will probably always give him a chance. And, since I said that, there's been a lot of people out there. Louis Riddick said something. Mike Martz said something. Heck, Kyle Shanahan even, talked about the attributes that Sam Darnold has. But a lot of these people are kind of saying, like, this is the opportunity that he has being in Kyle Shanahan's offense. So, I think the 49ers have made it clear that if Brock Purdy's healthy, he's the starting quarterback. But we're going to see in training camp, and I guess beginning next week when OTAs begin, how that quarterback situation looks. I think that it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that number 2 job, assuming that Brock Purdy is number 1. Is it going to be Trey Lance? Is it going to be Sam Darnold? And at this point, I really don't know how it's going to look when the 49ers break camp and the season begins.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to my next question, Matt. A lot of fans seem to be frustrated with the speaking so highly of Sam Darnold, and it almost feels like Trey Lance has been left out of the conversation and is almost like an afterthought. Like even Kyle Shanahan kind of catches himself at times and says, well, we believe so highly in Sam, but we also have Trey. It's always like Trey seems to be mentioned last, and it feels like a lot of fans are frustrated with that idea because there seems to be more excitement about what Sam Darnold has done, even though, and I think you hit the nail on the head, he hasn't even been a mediocre quarterback, right? Like he's been below average and at times, very frankly, very bad at certain times. So I think that's a little bit of where fans are looking at, like you said, Louis Riddick and Mike Martz, and and then a lot of people have this, and you can push back on this if you want, Matt. A lot of people have it in their head that when you speak, you're speaking not for the team, but you've heard things around the building, and you feel like it feels like it's coming from the team when you speak. Would you push back on that, or would you say that's true?
No, I mean I would say that I would say a lot of my opinions are formed by speaking to people inside the building and kind of getting a feel for where things are. It's not, well, for instance, if you're saying, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but if you're saying I'm delivering the message.
No, I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think a lot of people believe that.
Okay. Well, whatever the case may be, if I'm, if the thought is I'm delivering this message for the 49ers that they want out there about Sam Darnold, that's just simply not the case. I don't know what the 49ers would have to gain from that whatsoever. I mean, this is all going to be decided on the practice field and in the meeting room and everything else. I just think the reason that there's so much talk probably about Sam Darnold is because he's the new guy. Last year was all about Trey Lance. As soon as the 49ers lost in the NFC Championship game against the Rams in, what was that, January of 2022, everybody turned the page on Jimmy Garoppolo, and now it was Trey Lance's show. And when I say everybody turned the page on Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm talking about Jimmy Garoppolo turned the page on Jimmy Garoppolo. The 49ers turned the page on Jimmy Garoppolo. But they couldn't trade him because of that injury that he had, the shoulder surgery. So basically last offseason was all about Trey Lance. And it was, through the offseason program, he's now the leader of this team. He's quarterback one. He's all this. And it was that way through training camp too. And so the hard part for Trey Lance and for the 49ers in making that investment to go up and get him a couple of years ago in the draft and select him at number 3 overall is that they really haven't seen what Trey Lance is all about. And so, what happened? When Brock Purdy stepped in middle of the season taking over for Jimmy Garoppolo, who took over for Trey Lance, what happened? I mean, the 49ers offense was as good as it's ever been. Obviously, a lot of that probably had to do with Christian McCaffrey. But I know what Kyle Shanahan has said publicly is that they still have a lot of confidence in Trey Lance, but still there is that thought that it's a projection and they don't know exactly what he's capable of doing. But with Brock Purdy, seeing him start those 8 games or whatever it was, there's no projection. They saw what he did. And, the question I've had for Kyle Shanahan is that, how do we know that's just not a flash in the pan? How do we know that defenses won't adjust? And what we saw last year, because we see players all the time get off to great starts in whatever sport, get off to great sports. The people on the other side figure things out, decide how they want to defend them. And then that person kind of, it levels out, or in some cases that person disappears. But he thinks that what Brock Purdy did was not smoke and mirrors. It was very much in the structure of the offense. It was stuff that is sustainable. And so that's why he says that Brock Purdy is the guy who's, basically the leader in the clubhouse, who the 49ers anticipate being the starting quarterback, because he has absolutely showed it and proved it. Whereas Trey Lance, there's still so many unknowns about him.
Right, absolutely. And I think, again, that's the frustration is you've got 49er fans who say, well, we have this large sample size of Sam Darnold and there's excitement around him and we still don't know about Trey Lance, but there's never any. I feel like a lot of 49er fans have heard, imagine Sam Darnold in this offense with these weapons, and it's never imagine Trey Lance in because of the sample size. And I feel like one player sample size is being tossed out, another player's sample size is being used to judge a little bit more, even though we really don't know. But one last question about.
I'll just say this, Jason. It's all talk. It's all talk.
Yeah.
In bottom line, it doesn't matter. What matters is what's happening on the practice field. So, it'll all sort itself out. And in the meantime, and I realize, it's the off season and we all are talking 49ers. I'm writing about the 49ers, podcasting about the 49ers. So we all have to talk about things, but I can assure you that none of us talking about where the 49ers quarterback situation, none of that matters. What matters is what Kyle Shanahan sees on the practice field and in the meeting rooms. And so, does Trey Lance have an opportunity? Absolutely he does. But I will also say this, when you talk about a guy who's entering his 3rd NFL season and the 49ers have 4, I think, legitimate quarterbacks. Maybe not legitimate starting quarterbacks, but they have 4 legitimate NFL quarterbacks on their roster right now. When you talk about Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, Sam Darnold, and even Brandon Allen, who is the number 2 quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals the past 3 seasons. So what I would say about Trey Lance is, and I know he worked with Jeff Christensen, the quarterback's coach, to tighten up his mechanics. Everything I hear from the 49ers is that finger injury that he had at the end of his rookie training camp was a big deal because it changed how he gripped the football. And I think if anyone who watched training camp last year saw a lot of inconsistencies with his disability to hit a target. And so I think the 49ers went into this with their eyes wide open. They knew that Trey Lance wasn't going to be the most accurate passer in the world, but they felt also that because teams had to play them 11 on 11 because of his running threat, he didn't have to be the most accurate. He could still carry a football team with that dual threat ability, the running, the throwing, the big arm, basically using sideline to sideline and deep down the field because of that arm. So he's going to have his opportunity as he's having it right now, on the 49ers practice field. And then it's, all the talk in the world won't change what happens on the practice field and what Kyle Shanahan ultimately determines how he wants to handle that quarterback situation.
I 100% agree. Again, it's going to happen in training camp. That's kind of what I've been preaching as well, too. But it is offseason, and we are, quarterback position for the 49ers does not seem like it's going away anytime soon.
Absolutely.
One more question about.
Hey, it's incredible. It's an incredible situation. When you think about this, where you have I bet you, and I'm not gonna. I don't know if I can talk too much about Brandon Allen, but I certainly get the sense that the 49ers believe that they can win a Super Bowl with any of those three quarterbacks that we've been talking a lot about.
Mhm.
And, is it a stretch if you talk about Sam Darnold? Maybe. Is it a stretch if you're talking about Trey Lance? Maybe. But the way they think is that, last year through that what did it end up being, like a 12-game winning streak that the 49ers had, they went into Philadelphia feeling like they could win that game and go on to the Super Bowl, and then who knows what happens from there. But they felt that like they were in prime position to go in there and win with Brock Purdy. So they feel the same way heading into this season with Brock Purdy.
Absolutely. And you took one of the questions that I was going to ask you is I do think the 49ers are trying to do something that isn't the norm for NFL teams, i.e. winning without an elite quarterback, right? Patrick Mahomes seems to be a lock for the Super Bowl every single year. No matter how many steps the Chiefs take back on defense, they still have a quarterback who can get it done. You saw Jalen Hurts this year, all of those things. One more question, though, real quick about the quarterback. There's a narrative out there that the locker room has a say-so in who's playing, right? Like if Trey Lance comes out of the gate and he has a game where he's, up and down a little bit, that they'll go to Kyle Shanahan and they'll say, we need someone else to play, or we want this guy to play. Is there any truth to that at all? Or is that just, again, outside, just trying to put pieces together?
I don't think there's any truth to that at all, but I will say that they kind of go hand in hand. In other words, the locker room sees the same thing that the coaches see, or maybe more to your point, the coaches, in the case of Kyle Shanahan, he sees the same thing that the players see. And I mean, I wrote right after the season last year that there would be people in the locker room pissed off if Brock Purdy, weren't the quarterback, because they see the same things. And I mean, when Kyle Shanahan watches game film and goes through it, I mean, he's pointing out the stuff that he likes. He's pointing out the stuff he doesn't like. So it kind of goes hand in hand that the locker room, who are being taught by Kyle Shanahan, would see things the way Kyle Shanahan sees them as well. So I think it's kind of either or.
Right. And I know you're pressed for time, so I'm going to ask you one last question. I mean, the training camp stuff, I guess, like, the only thing that I'll say is that, like, I have TDP, Danny Gray, Ambry Thomas a little bit on the clock in this training camp.
Mm-hmm.
They need to prove something in order to stay on this roster, especially when you look at the way the 49ers have kind of built this roster out. And then we have the kicker competition, which is going to be must-see TV right in training camp as well. I mean, I wonder what the
competition, Jason.
Yeah, it better not be a competition when you invest that high of draft capital in Jake Moody. It would have to be an absolute disaster for them to not keep him.
In fact, I'm kind of surprised that Zane Gonzalez is still on the team.
Still here. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Okay. As an organization, do you feel the 49ers are pressed right now to get this thing done because of the parity in the league, because of how close they've gotten, and because other teams are catching up as fast? Like the Eagles went from a playoff team to a powerhouse as quickly as possible. The Dallas Cowboys are catching up. Here comes Seattle. Do you feel that the organization feels like this year is the year that they need to get this done? Because you can't rely and rest on the laurel of, well, we'll be here again next year. We'll be here again the year after that.
I think there's urgency every year. And so I think what maybe creates a possibility that the 49ers could sustain this a little bit longer, though, where it isn't just a make or break year, is because of the position that we've been talking about. I mean, the 49ers don't have a whole lot of money. In fact, they have very little money invested in the quarterback position. So, that's part of probably why, Brock Purdy is so attractive to them, in the sense that he's getting paid, relatively speaking, and certainly for NFL quarterbacks, he's getting paid very, very little.
Not even a cap hit on the team, right? He's not even one of the 52 cap hits.
Isn't that amazing? Think about that. And so what does that do? It enables a team to really build out the rest of the roster. And so, when you talk about Patrick Mahomes, I would say inarguably the best quarterback in the NFL. His supporting cast is darn good, but it's not great, because they don't have that kind of money to allocate to other positions. Where the 49ers, I mean, it is a star-studded cast, and you can look at players at every level of the offense and defense and find some of the highest paid players at their respective positions. And then I would assume, right before training camp, there's a good possibility that Nick Bosa will kind of shatter the market for defensive players. So when you have, let's say, Brock Purdy's in the second year of a 4-year contract that he signs, the mandatory 4-year contract. They can redo that thing after 3 years. So they can't even touch his contract after this coming season. So when you think of it in those terms, that means the 49ers window continues to be open. And I think that was part of the reason, the Eagles have a very good roster as well, but they couldn't touch Javon Hargrave. There was no way they'd be able to re-sign him. He knew it. They knew it. Everybody knew it, because Jalen Hurts was going to be getting a big money contract. So I do think that what the 49ers are trying to do, and I think they've been successful, is to try to create a salary structure within the organization where it is sustainable, where it's not just it's all or nothing right now. It almost had that kind of all or nothing feel when they traded for Christian McCaffrey last year, until you realize that McCaffrey was still under contract for 2 or 3 more seasons. So when the Rams did that in 2021, they were getting guys like Von Miller, who's, they were renting for half the year, gave up a lot to get him. They had him for half the year. He was going to be a free agent, and they knew that they weren't going to be able to keep him. But what the 49ers did with McCaffrey was they give up all the draft capital, but they know that they're going to have him for a period of time after that. So I would say that, yes, absolutely, there's urgency, because when you look at the 49ers roster right now, they're probably one of, whatever you'd say, 5 or 6 teams in the NFL where you can pretty much look at it and go, well, they're set up to win right now. Only one of those teams will win, but I don't think it's just a push all your chips into the center of the table for this season. Every year you don't win the Super Bowl is a missed opportunity, and certainly it has been for the 49ers 3 of the past 4 seasons. But I don't view this season as just an all or nothing kind of year for them.
Okay, Matt, last question, and I'll get you out of here. I know you're pressed for time. The 49ers cleared about $10 million in cap space, and it took them less than $1 million of that cap space to actually sign all of their draft picks and all of their undrafted free agents. For me, I feel like there's 3 options for this team. You can go out and sign one of these edge rushers who are out there, Leonard Floyd, Yannick Ngakoue, Justin Houston, they kind of come to mind. Or you can hold on to that money and in season, like you said, almost like how the Rams did with an expiring contract, use that money to bring somebody in. And if they sign Nick Bosa, that really doesn't touch that money because it keeps it away from the first year with the cap situation. Do you have a sense of what the 49ers are planning to do with this $9-10 million that they have sitting around?
No, not really. I don't. I know they want to keep a cushion because, as we've seen in the past, when injuries occur, you have to have a cushion of cap dollars, because, those dollars don't go away when a guy goes on IR. What happens is the dollars now are spent on the person you bring up to the 53-man roster. So I know they like to keep a cushion as far as draft, or as far as the salary cap space. And of course that money rolls over to future seasons. But I would kind of agree with you, if one of those edge rushers kind of falls in their lap, if they don't like what they see in training camp, as far as, who's going to be that person opposite of Nick Bosa, I don't know. And that's kind of the one thing I look at and I go, okay, who's going to be their base down defensive end? Is it Cleveland Farrell? Is it Drake Jackson? I kind of see Drake Jackson as maybe a situational pass rusher like he was early in his rookie season before he lost power and kind of fell off the face of the earth. Is Robert Beal going to have any kind of impact? That's the one position where you look at it and you go, there's nothing really too exciting there at that defensive end spot opposite of Bosa. So, could they use somebody? Now the guys you mentioned, are those guys on the back ends of their career? Absolutely. Do they have anything left? I don't know, but that is definitely something, a position where I think it makes sense to keep an eye on and see if something kind of falls in their lap where they don't have to make a big expenditure on the cap to bring in somebody who could give them a boost.
Yeah, and that's all I was really talking about. Again, thank you so much, Matt. I know you had to get out of here. You had a time limit, but thank you so much being gracious for your time. Thank you for always being accessible and always being nice to the small people whenever we get a chance to talk, man. It's always great to catch up with you, Matt. And as always, keep up the great work.
All right, Jason, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. It's always good to bump into you a few times a year. So take care, and thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you. Guys, it's Matt Maiocco. And, guys, I think, again, like a lot of the stuff that Matt was saying is so true. Let me move this out the way about the quarterback position and about many other things, especially with the quarterback position. It's not going to be decided with our thoughts or anything like that. I would have loved to have had a little bit more time, but obviously, it's a busy man right there. But for me, it always is going to boil down to what happens on the field. I don't think that there's going to be any sort of outside influence. Kyle Shanahan is not going to be pushed around and told what to do one way or another when it comes to anything, let alone the quarterback position, I think. And then I thought the introduction in terms of what I was talking about with the salary cap is just, you've got that money right there. So I do think the 49ers kind of let them know, like, we're going to hold on to this money here just in case. And the injury thing is a great point by Matt. But I feel, again, if there is somebody who you can get on an expiring deal who can help, right, give you that boost up over the edge to help you get to where you need to go. And hearing Matt talk about the urgency that the 49ers should have based on how close they've gotten, based on, how they built this roster, and they don't have to pay the quarterbacks and those things. It does feel like this is a big year for the 49ers to try and get it done, based off of past, but also based on how this roster is built. So thank you again to Matt Maiocco. He's always been nice to me. He's always been gracious with his time, reached out, and he said, for sure, man, it's pretty awesome to do stuff like that. And I'm glad you guys enjoyed the content as well, too. But I'm going to get out of here. I'll see you guys later today. State of the Franchise with Brad Graham. But for Jason, as always, let's go Niners. Welcome, everybody. Let's go Niners. My name is Jason Aponte.